The galactic assembly chamber loomed vast and cold, its architecture defying human comprehension with geometric impossibilities that seemed designed specifically to unsettle the human delegation. Ambassador James Marshall stood alone on the speaking platform, a solitary figure of flesh and bone amid beings of crystalline structures, gaseous formations, and silicon consciousnesses. 217 alien civilizations sat in judgment. 217 species who had discovered faster-than-light travel centuries, some millennia before humanity stumbled upon the principle of gravitational folding. 217 voices that had already decided Earth's fate. Marshall scanned the chamber, his weathered face betraying nothing despite the tension radiating through his body. At 53, he had spent his career diffusing international conflicts. But this was different. The survival of his entire species hung in the balance. "The Assembly recognizes Ambassador Marshall of Earth," announced the presiding entity, a being of pure energy contained within a lattice of rare minerals. Its voice resonated not through air but directly within the minds of all present. "You may present your final appeal." The human delegation behind Marshall shifted nervously. Dr. Eleanor Wright, Earth's leading xenobiologist, clutched her datapad so tightly her knuckles white. General Thomas Blackwood's face remained impassive, but his eyes darted between the various delegations, assessing threats as he had done for decades in Earth's unified military. Marshall cleared his throat. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Assembly, I stand before you not merely as a representative of Earth, but as a voice for an entire branch of evolutionary development that you propose to confine. I ask you to reconsider." "The time for rhetoric has passed," interrupted the HFY representative, a crystalline entity whose facets glittered with internal light. "We have studied your species for 3 of your decades. The evidence is conclusive and troubling." The center of the chamber illuminated with a holographic display showing Earth's history, wars, environmental destruction, nuclear proliferation, and the exponential acceleration of technological development. "In merely 2 centuries, continued the Zentari, you progressed from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary gravitational manipulation. Your technological growth curve is unprecedented and dangerous." Marshall raised his hand. "With respect, advancement is not a crime. Our rapid progress demonstrates our adaptability. Your adaptability is precisely what concerns us," said the Veltraxian diplomat, a methane-breathing arthropoid whose translator conveyed cold logic. "Of the 742 spacefaring civilizations we have catalogued, only 29 have exhibited what we term crisis evolution, the ability to make radical technological leaps in response to existential threats." The hologram shifted to show various human innovations that had emerged during wars, pandemics, and resource shortages. "Of those 29 species with crisis evolution capabilities," the Veltraxian continued, 23 destroyed themselves. 5 destroyed other civilizations before being contained. Only 1 achieved stability, and they voluntarily accepted the restrictions we now propose for you." Marshall's jaw tightened. "So your solution is to confine us to our solar system, to establish a quarantine zone that we cannot cross? You call yourselves advanced, yet your answer to difference is imprisonment." A murmur rippled through the assembly, not of disagreement, but of confirmation. They had expected this response. The Morellian representative, a colony consciousness housed in a humanoid body, leaned forward. "Ambassador Marshall, we do not propose this lightly. Your species combines several troubling characteristics. You are apex predators, pack hunters with hierarchical dominance structures, and possess bilateral symmetry with forward-facing eyes, evolutionary markers of pursuit-predation. Yet, unlike other predatory species, you exhibit unprecedented empathic capabilities toward in-group members." "You're saying we're dangerous because we care about each other?" Marshall asked incredulously. "No," replied the Morellian. "You're dangerous because you care selectively. You will sacrifice anything to protect your in-group, including the stability of entire systems. Your history demonstrates this repeatedly." The chamber darkened as the presiding entity raised its luminescent appendages. "We have deliberated extensively. Earth will be confined to a Class C quarantine zone encompassing your solar system. Transgression beyond the Neptune orbital path will trigger automated defense system. This is not negotiable, but neither is it eternal. In 500 standard cycles, your case will be reviewed." Marshall stood motionless, absorbing the verdict. 500 cycles, nearly 700 Earth years of confinement. Generations would live and die never seeing beyond the outer planets. "May I address the assembly one final time?" he asked quietly. The presiding entity pulsed affirmatively. Marshall stepped closer to the center of the platform. "You believe you understand us because you've observed our history, but you've missed something fundamental. Every restriction placed upon humanity has become an obsession to overcome. Every wall becomes a challenge to scale. Every lock, a puzzle to solve." He looked around the chamber, meeting the sensory organs of as many delegates as he could. "You think you're protecting the galaxy from us, but you're actually setting the stage for our greatest evolutionary pressure yet. Today, you've united humanity against a common restriction. Today, you've given us a problem that will focus our crisis evolution as never before." The Zentari's crystalline structure flashed with patterns indicating alarm. "Is this a threat, Ambassador?" Marshall smiled thinly. "No, it's a prediction. You're building a cage for a species that has spent its entire existence breaking free of natural limitations. You aren't containing us. You're challenging us." He stepped back, his voice lowering but carrying clearly through the chamber. "Remember this moment. Not as the day you confined humanity, but as the day you guaranteed we would reach further than we ever dreamed possible." The presiding entity signaled the end of the session. As Marshall turned to leave, General Blackwood whispered, "That won't change their minds." "It wasn't meant to," Marshall replied softly. "It was meant to change ours." As the human delegation departed, the assembly continued its deliberations on implementation details. Satisfied that they had averted a potential galactic disruption, they discussed the strategic placement of monitoring stations, the particulars of the energy barrier, and the protocols for minimal contact with the quarantined species. None noticed the small smile that played across Dr. Wright's lips as she made cryptic notations in her datapad, nor the determined glint in General Blackwood's eyes as he memorized the positions and apparent vulnerabilities of the Assembly's security forces. Most significantly, none recognized the significance of the seed that Ambassador Marshall had planted in the minds of every human present. The quarantine was not an end, but a beginning. Not a cage, but a starting line. 500 cycles would pass in the blink of a cosmic eye. And when that time came, humanity would not be the same species that stood before them today. In the depths of interstellar space, the Galactic Assembly's verdict propagated through relay stations toward Earth. The quarantine ships were already being dispatched, their crews confident in the wisdom of the Assembly's decision. The problem was contained. The galaxy was safe, or so they believed. 19 years after confinement, Director William Hayes stood at the viewport of Research Station Prometheus, watching as the experimental vessel disappeared. Not with the familiar flash of conventional engines, but simply ceased to exist from observable space-time. One moment there, the next elsewhere. The test was successful. "Transition complete," announced Dr. Sophia Reynolds, her voice steady despite the historical significance of the moment. "Vessel Defiance has successfully phased into n-dimensional space. All readings nominal." Hayes allowed himself a rare smile. After nearly 2 centuries of confinement within the solar system, humanity had found its escape route, not by breaking through the alien barriers but by stepping sideways out of reality itself. "How long before the monitoring systems detect the energy signature?" Hayes asked. Reynolds consulted her quantum display. "They won't. That's the beauty of it. The Galactic Assembly's sensors are calibrated for disturbances in 3-dimensional space plus time. They're looking for ripples in the pond, but we're no longer in the pond." Hayes nodded, remembering the day everything changed. It had been just 19 years into humanity's confinement when Dr. Marcus Reed had observed quantum anomalies while studying the alien barrier technology. The aliens had inadvertently revealed the existence of dimensions they themselves couldn't perceive. While they focused on containing humanity through conventional means, energy barriers, automated sentinels, and regular patrols, they had overlooked something fundamental. The prison walls only extended in directions they could see. The Phoenix Complex, buried beneath the Martian South Pole, sprawled through kilometers of underground chambers. Once merely a research outpost, it had grown into the nerve center of humanity's secret renaissance. Here, in chambers shielded from both conventional detection and the newer N-dimensional scanners, a precaution against unknown alien capabilities, the Oversight Council gathered. General Robert Alvarez, grandson of the man who had stood beside Ambassador Marshall 2 centuries before, strode into the chamber. At the center table sat representatives from Earth, Mars, the Jovian moons, and the Kuiper habitats, all watching him expectantly. "Defiance has successfully transitioned and reappeared at the target coordinates," he announced. "The Mendoza theory holds. We can traverse the galaxy without moving through conventional space." Administrator Sarah Chen of the Mars colonies nodded slowly. "After all this time, we've been building ships that can't leave the solar system, when we should have been building ships that can leave reality itself." "It's not just ships," interjected Dr. Anton Nazari, appearing as a hologram from Europa's deep-sea laboratories. "The implications of N-dimensional manipulation go far beyond transportation. Our energy experiments suggest we can tap into dimensional variants for power generation that would make fusion look like a campfire." Alvarez activated the central display, showing the galaxy with hundreds of small indicators. "These are the locations of the Assembly's watch posts, defense platforms, and major worlds. For nearly 2 centuries we've been mapping them through observation and the strategic deployment of passive probes that appeared to be nothing more than space debris." He tapped another control, and dozens of new markers appeared. "These in blue, and these are the locations where we've detected no surveillance and minimal activity. Perfect sites for our first extrasolar colonies." "What about the directive?" asked Chen. The Preservation Directive had been humanity's guiding principle since confinement. Advance technological development while avoiding detection, build strength without revealing it, and preserve human life at all costs. "The directive remains in effect," said Alvarez firmly. "We're not ready for confrontation." "Not yet." In the Forbin asteroid, officially designated as a mining operation, but secretly housing the largest shipyard in human space, Dr. Eleanor Wright II studied the ancient alien artifact that had changed everything. Recovered by an N-dimensional scout ship from the ruins on Proxima Centauri b, the artifact had confirmed what her team had long suspected. The Galactic Assembly was not the first interstellar civilization, nor the most advanced. Previous galactic empires had risen and fallen, some achieving technological heights that the current assembly could barely comprehend. "Look here," she said to her assistant, Michael Davis. "These glyphs describe dimensional folding in ways that align perfectly with our own discoveries, but they're at least 8 million years old." "The assembly doesn't know about these ruins?" Davis asked. Wright shook her head. "According to our intelligence, they dismissed Proxima Centauri as an unremarkable system, low resources, no habitable worlds by their standards. We only investigated because it was the closest star to us." She zoomed in on a particular section of the artifact. "But what's most fascinating is this reference to the thinking species who the ancients believed would eventually master dimensional mechanics due to their unique neurological structure." Davis leaned closer. "They're describing humans? 8 million years ago? Possibly not us, specifically, but a type of consciousness comparable to ours. The kind that can perceive relationships between seemingly unrelated phenomena, the foundation of dimensional physics." The artifact had provided confirmation that humanity's approach was correct, but more importantly, it had provided hints of forgotten technologies far beyond what either humans or the current assembly possessed. Ankara is a desert world technically within assembly space but mostly ignored due to its harsh conditions. Ambassador Jacob Turner met with representatives of the Voris, a supposedly lesser species that had been subjugated by the assembly centuries before humanity's discovery. The Voss, resembling tall, slender humanoids with iridescent skin, had reached out to human operatives after detecting unusual energy signatures from clandestine human probes. Rather than reporting these anomalies to their assembly overseers, they had investigated independently. "Your dimensional transition technology is impressive," said Alani, the Voss elder, her voice melodic, despite the translator. "We have observed your kind for decades. You accomplish in centuries what takes others millennia." Turner maintained his diplomatic composure. "And you've kept our presence secret. Why?" "The Assembly claims wisdom, but practices stagnation," Alani replied. "They contain what they fear might surpass them. The Zentari, the Veltraxians, the Morellians. They were young species once, vibrant and innovative. Now they preserve their power by ensuring no new perspectives challenge them." She moved to a holographic display, activating it with a gesture. "We are not alone in our dissatisfaction. 17 species have joined our silent coalition. Some, like the Marins, retain technology from before their integration into the Assembly. Others, like the Tholian collectives, have developed computational capabilities that they keep hidden." Turner recognized the strategic value immediately. "You're proposing an alliance." "We propose liberation," corrected Alani. "Not through war, the Assembly's military might remains overwhelming, but through a fundamental shift in how reality itself is navigated and utilized." Aboard the Assembly monitoring station Vigilance 17, positioned at the edge of Sol's exclusion zone, Survey Commander Zelthar reviewed the routine reports with growing unease. "These power readings from Mars don't match their reported fusion capacity," he noted to his second-in-command. "And the material shipments to the Kuiper bodies exceed their stated construction projects." "Humans have always been inefficient," responded Subcommander Vex dismissively. "They waste resources, build redundant systems. It's their nature." Zelthar wasn't convinced. In his 90 years monitoring Sol, he had observed subtle but troubling patterns. Their scientific publications have decreased by 60% in the last 50 years, yet their technological implementation continues to advance. They're hiding developments. "All confined species attempt deception," Vex said, the patterns on his crystalline form indicating boredom. "The protocols account for this. Their barrier remains intact. Their ships are confined, and our sensors detect no attempt to breach the Neptune threshold." Zelthar rotated his sensory cluster toward the holographic representation of the solar system. "Perhaps we're not looking for the right things." In the shadows of Saturn's rings, the command ship Ascendant prepared for its first official n-dimensional jump beyond the solar system. Admiral Jessica Hayes, great-granddaughter of William Hayes, addressed the assembled leaders and representatives from across human space and their new alien allies. 2 centuries ago, the Assembly thought they had contained a dangerous species, she began. They believed they were protecting the galaxy from us. In reality, they were protecting themselves from inevitable change. Behind her, through the vast viewport, hundreds of ships moved into formation. The first battle group of humanity's hidden fleet, constructed in secret asteroid bases and the dark sides of moons. Each vessel incorporated technology based on both human innovation and the ancient knowledge recovered from forgotten worlds. While they monitored our visible activities, we expanded inward into scientific realms they never thought to guard against. While they counted our conventional ships, we built an armada they cannot detect. While they assumed we were trapped within their barriers, we established 47 colonies across 26 star systems. She gestured to the assembled representatives of the coalition species. The Vorse, the Marins, the Tholians, and others who had chosen to ally with humanity against assembly stagnation. Today marks the formal establishment of what we have been building for generations. The Dimensional Accord. Not an empire that seeks to replace the assembly, but a coalition that will ultimately transform it. The main display activated. showing a galactic map with hundreds of blue indicators representing human and allied outposts, resource operations, and colonies, all existing beyond the knowledge of the Assembly. "We have built a civilization in the spaces between what they perceive," Hayes continued. "We have turned their barriers into our foundations. And when the time comes, when we are ready, we will not need to destroy the Assembly. We will simply show them how limited their understanding of reality has been." As the assembled leaders applauded, Admiral Hayes gazed at the image of distant Earth displayed on a secondary screen. The birthplace of humanity still officially operated under Assembly restrictions, its official government still pretending to accept confinement while secretly coordinating humanity's greatest achievement. A hidden empire had grown in the blind spots of their oppressors, and soon the Assembly would begin to realize that the cage they had built didn't just fail to contain humanity. It had forced them to become something far more powerful than they would have otherwise become. In the silence of space, the first official fleet of the Dimensional Accord disappeared from conventional reality, beginning the next phase of a plan 2 centuries in the making. 243 years after confinement, the Galactic Assembly emergency session glowed with the agitated light patterns of its 217 member species. High Arbiter Zelvoth of the Zentauri Dominion hovered at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with unprecedented patterns of alarm. "The evidence is irrefutable," he announced, projecting the compiled intelligence reports into the shared consciousness of the Assembly. "Humanity has escaped confinement." The chamber erupted in patterns of disbelief and outrage as the data streamed through. Unauthorized human outposts discovered in the Orion Spur, unexplained energy signatures detected across multiple sectors, and most disturbing of all, confirmed reports of 17 subject species engaged in clandestine communications with human operatives. "How is this possible?" demanded the Veltraxian Prime, its methane sacs inflating with agitation. "Their barrier remained intact. Our monitoring stations detected no breach." "They went around the barriers," replied Zelvoth. "Preliminary analysis suggests they've developed some form of dimensional manipulation technology. They didn't need to break through our defenses because they found a way to exist outside the dimensional constraints we monitor." The Morellian collective consciousness pulsed with cold calculation. "We underestimated their adaptability. The containment approach has failed. We must implement the extinction protocol." There was no debate. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the Assembly Defense Fleet, the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy, received its activation codes. The hunt had begun. On the human colony world of Nova Terra, Admiral Jessica Hayes received the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The Dimensional Accord's deep cover operatives within the Assembly systems had transmitted the Defense Fleet's movement patterns precisely as expected. "They've committed 97% of their military assets," she observed to the gathered leadership of the Accord. "Just as we predicted." Grand Marshal Thomas Wright, Supreme Military Commander of Humanity's forces, nodded. "Their tactics haven't evolved in 10,000 years. They still think in terms of overwhelming force applied to conventional targets." On the strategic display before them, red indicators representing Assembly vessels converged toward known human settlements, the decoy outposts intentionally allowed to be discovered over the past decade. "All evacuation protocols complete," reported General Ilani of the Voss contingent. "No Accord citizens remain at the target locations." Hayes touched a control, and new blue indicators appeared throughout the display, thousands of them, far outnumbering the red. "Dimensional fleet elements in position. End-phase weapon systems online. Transition protocols activated." She looked around at the assembled leadership, human and alien alike, who had worked for generations toward this moment. "The Assembly believes they're launching a surprise attack. In reality, they're walking into the most carefully prepared trap in galactic history." Wright's weathered face showed no emotion as he gave the order, "Execute Operation Revelation." High Commander Trasdol of the Assembly Defense Fleet felt the first stirrings of unease as his flagship approached the human colony on Proxima Centauri B. The forward elements of his fleet had reported the settlement completely abandoned. Not recently evacuated, but showing signs of being uninhabited for years. Curious, he noted to his strategic advisors. It appears they knew we were coming. Impossible, replied his senior tactical officer. The extinction order was issued less than 30 standard units ago. Before Trasdil could respond, reality itself seemed to shift. There was no other way to describe it. The stars visible through the command viewport appeared to slide sideways, as though the universe had taken a step to the left. Suddenly, his vessel was surrounded. Where empty space had existed moments before, thousands of ships now hung in perfect formation. A fleet that dwarfed his own. Ships of human design, yes, but also vessels bearing the distinct architectural elements of the Vorse, the Marans, and a dozen other supposedly subjugated species. How? Trasdil began, but his tactical systems were already answering his unfinished question. The vessels hadn't traveled to this position. They had simply altered their dimensional phase to become perceptible. They had been there all along. His communication officer's voice carried the unfamiliar tone of fear. We're receiving a transmission from all directions simultaneously. On the command display appeared a human female, Admiral Hayes, flanked by representatives of numerous species. Her expression contained neither hatred nor triumph, merely calm resolution. This message is being delivered simultaneously to every vessel in the assembly fleet, she began. Your weapons and propulsion systems have been neutralized by targeted dimensional dampening fields. You are not being attacked. You are being awakened. The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly, for the first time in its ancient history, fell completely silent as the holographic evidence unfolded before them. The data streams and artifacts presented by the human delegation, now standing as equals in the chamber, told a story that rewrote galactic history itself. Ambassador Michael Turner, directly descended from the human who had established the first alien alliance centuries before, directed the Assembly's attention to the central display. These are the Axiom monoliths, he explained, showing images of massive structures discovered on worlds throughout the galaxy. Some hidden beneath oceans, others within gas giants, many on barren moons. They were created by those you call the precursors, the civilization that existed 10 million years before any of your species achieved sentience. The display shifted to show the intricate glyphs and mathematical formulae encoded within the monoliths, symbols that matched perfectly with humanity's dimensional physics equations. The precursors didn't just disappear, Turner continued. They evolved beyond conventional existence, but before they transcended, they established a test, a cosmic filter to identify which species might eventually follow their path. The holographic display revealed a complex fractal pattern, a roadmap of technological and social development spanning millions of years. Each major species in this galaxy was guided toward a specific role, Turner explained. The assembly species were meant to create order and stability, a necessary foundation. But you were never meant to be the endpoint of galactic evolution. He highlighted a particular node in the pattern. This inflection point in the precursor's design represents the introduction of a catalyst species, one with a unique neural architecture and evolutionary history that would allow it to perceive dimensional mechanics and transcend conventional limitations. The Zenthuri High Arbiter's crystalline form vibrated with the equivalent of stunned realization. You are suggesting that humans are this catalyst species. That everything our rise to dominance, your discovery, even our decision to confine you, was predetermined by these precursors. Not predetermined, corrected Turner. Probabilistically orchestrated. You didn't confine us because you chose to. You confined us because the pattern required it. Our confinement created the evolutionary pressure necessary for us to discover dimensional physics centuries earlier than we would have otherwise. The data streams continued, showing irrefutable evidence that the Assembly's entire history had been subtly guided by precursor artifacts and environmental factors designed to create the perfect conditions for humanity's emergence and subsequent transformation. Your purpose was never to rule, Turner said gently. It was to prepare. 1 year later, Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of the dimensional vessel Transcendence, watching as the former assembly capital world below was transformed. Where once stood monuments to hierarchy and control, new structures emerged. Centers of learning, technological innovation, and interspecies cooperation. Beside her stood Selvath, former High Arbiter of the Zinthari, now serving as one of the principal architects of the new galactic confluence, the replacement for the disbanded assembly. I still struggle to accept how thoroughly we misunderstood our own history, he admitted, his crystalline form now displaying the softer patterns of philosophical contemplation. Generations of my people believed we were the pinnacle of evolution. Hayes smiled. That's the beauty of the precursor's design. Each species had to believe in their own exceptionalism to fulfill their role. The assembly species created stability and order. The subjugated species developed resilience and adaptability. Humanity, isolated on Earth, developed the unique cognitive approach needed to break through dimensional limitations. And now, asked Selvath, what is our purpose in this new era? Hayes gestured toward the stars visible through the dimensional viewport. Not just the conventional stars of their galaxy, but the multidimensional layers beyond, realms of existence that only recently had become perceptible to all species through human-derived technology. The confluence is preparing the galaxy for the next phase, she replied. The precursor data suggests that once a sufficient number of sentient beings achieve dimensional awareness, a threshold will be crossed. The entire galaxy will undergo a transformation similar to what the precursors themselves experienced. She turned to face him directly. Your people's mistake wasn't believing you had a special purpose. It was thinking that purpose was to rule rather than to serve something greater. On Earth, in the original United Nations building, preserved for centuries as a historical monument, James Marshall VI stood before representatives of every known sentient species in the galaxy. Behind him hung a simple painting of his ancestor, Ambassador James Marshall, who had stood defiant before the Assembly nearly 2.5 centuries earlier. My ancestor once told the Assembly that every restriction placed upon humanity becomes an obsession to overcome, he began. He understood something fundamental about our nature that even we didn't fully grasp at the time. Humans don't just adapt to overcome limitations, we are transformed by them. The chamber, once the site of humanity's earliest attempts at global governance, now served as the ceremonial birthplace of the cosmic confluence, a fundamentally new approach to galactic civilization based on dimensional harmony rather than hierarchical control. The precursors didn't design us to rule the galaxy, Marshall continued. They designed us to liberate it, not through conquest, but through transformation. Each species brings unique perceptions, abilities, and consciousness. Together, we form something greater than the sum of our parts. He activated the dimensional aperture at the center of the chamber, a window not just to distant space, but to layers of reality previously inaccessible to conscious perception. Through it, the assembled representatives could glimpse the faintest outline of what the precursor data had named the Omega Point, a future state of cosmic evolution toward which all sentient life was progressing. From a prison planet, humanity expanded to the stars, Marshall said, his voice resonating with conviction born from generations of struggle and discovery. But the true journey was never about conquering space. It was about transcending it altogether. As the dimensional aperture widened, the chamber filled with light from realms beyond conventional existence, the first tangible evidence of the cosmic transformation to come. We stand now at the threshold of what the precursors began millions of years ago, Marshall concluded, not as rulers of the galaxy but as awakeners. The prison was never Earth. It was the limited conception of reality itself. And now, together, we have the key. Around him, representatives of over 200 species, former oppressors and oppressed alike, witnessed the first glimpse of a future that none of their ancestors could have imagined, but that all had unknowingly worked toward throughout their history. The cosmic design set in motion eons ago had reached its inflection point, and humanity, the improbable catalyst, once caged on a single world, had fulfilled its purpose, not by conquering the galaxy, but by awakening it to its true potential.